They threw her out with nothing on a gray November morning, the kind where the sky feels heavy enough to crush whatever hope you still have left. One cardboard suitcase, a coat too thin for the cold, and a silence so loud it rang in her ears as the courthouse doors closed behind her. No one noticed her then. No one guessed that within hours, her name alone would freeze the entire courtroom and turn whispered judgment into stunned reverence. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of faith that carries people through their darkest moments, take a second right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that God often works in ways no one expects. Her name was Grace Elizabeth Whitmore. Though for 12 years she had been known only as Grace Miller, the dutiful wife of a respected businessman in a small Midwestern town in the United States. She had married young, believing love and faith would be enough, believing the vows she spoke under a white-steepled church would shelter her forever. Grace had given up her scholarship to a private university, traded her dreams of law school for a modest home, Sunday potlucks, and the unglamorous labor of holding a family together. She cooked, cleaned, volunteered at church, and raised their son with the kind of devotion that rarely earns applause. She believed that humility was holy and endurance was obedience. But time has a way of revealing what patience cannot fix. Her husband, Daniel Miller, grew successful, confident, and then distant. The more his name appeared on plaques and donation lists, the smaller Grace seemed to become in his world. She endured quiet dismissals, long absences, and a growing coldness that settled into the house like an unwelcome guest. She prayed harder. She tried to be better. She told herself that suffering had purpose. When rumors of another woman began to circulate, Grace refused to believe them, until belief was no longer possible. The divorce was swift and merciless. Daniel hired an aggressive legal team, men who spoke in polished language and treated Grace like an inconvenience. She had no lawyer of her own, trusting that fairness would prevail, trusting that the years she gave would matter. The house was in Daniel's name. The accounts were in Daniel's name. Even the car she drove had been purchased under his company. The court granted her almost nothing, citing lack of documentation and the prenuptial agreement she had signed without counsel, years ago out of love and trust. When the judge's gavel fell, Grace felt something inside her break open, not loudly but completely. She gathered her few belongings from the marital home while movers boxed up furniture that would stay behind. She left her wedding Bible on the nightstand by accident and did not go back for it. By the time she reached the courthouse steps, she had $27 in her purse and no clear place to go. Her son would live with Daniel during the school year, the judge had decided, because stability favored the parent with resources. Grace kissed her boy goodbye with a smile she barely held together, whispering prayers over his hair that he would never know how desperate they were. She slept that night on a church pew, wrapped in her coat, listening to the hum of the heater and the echo of her own breathing. In the early morning, she knelt and prayed, not for revenge but for direction. She asked God what she was supposed to do now that everything familiar had been stripped away. What she felt was not an answer but a memory, rising slowly and insistently. Her father's voice, her childhood home, a law library filled with leather-bound volumes, a name she had not spoken in years, Grace Whitmore. Her father, Thomas Whitmore, had been a respected constitutional attorney before his death, known for landmark cases defending the powerless. Grace had grown up surrounded by legal discussions, debates about justice, and the belief that the law was a tool to serve truth, not crush it. When she married Daniel, she had taken his name gladly, setting aside her own history without a second thought. Now, sitting alone in a quiet church, she realized how much of herself she had abandoned. That morning, she walked to the county clerk's office and filed paperwork to restore her maiden name. The clerk glanced at the form, paused for a fraction of a second, then continued typing, unaware of the significance. Grace did not explain. She did not need to. The weight of the name settled on her shoulders, not as pride, but as responsibility. With help from an old family friend who recognized her last name and offered a spare room, Grace began to rebuild. She took a job at a legal aid clinic answering phones, her voice steady even when her heart was not. She listened to stories of eviction, abuse, and broken systems, recognizing pieces of her own pain in every caller. At night, she studied law again. Her father's old book spread across a borrowed desk. She prayed before every chapter, asking God to sharpen her mind and soften her heart. Months passed. Grace grew stronger, quieter, more certain. When her son visited on weekends, she filled their time with warmth and reassurance. Never speaking ill of his father, she taught him to pray, to tell the truth, to believe that doing the right thing mattered even when it hurt. Daniel, meanwhile, grew irritated by her calm resilience. He missed a payment. He rescheduled visits. He assumed she would accept whatever scraps he offered, as she always had. Then came the motion to modify custody and support, filed by Grace herself. The courtroom was the same one that had stripped her down months earlier. But she walked into it differently now. Her back was straight. Her hands were steady. She wore a simple navy dress and a small cross necklace. The murmurs began as soon as her name was read into the record, first as confusion, then as recognition. Attorneys shifted in their seats. The judge looked up sharply, scanning his memory. Grace Elizabeth Whitmore. The room changed in an instant. The name carried history, precedent, and respect. It carried the echo of cases taught in law schools and cited in appeals. Grace felt the weight of every eye, but she did not shrink. She presented evidence with clarity and restraint, demonstrating discrepancies in income, violations of the agreement, and the emotional toll of instability on her son. She spoke of faith, responsibility, and the purpose of law, not as an abstract ideal, but as a living covenant between people. There was no anger in her approach, no theatrics, just truth laid out carefully, reverently. The courtroom listened. The judge listened. Daniel listened for the first time, truly seeing the woman he had dismissed. When the ruling came, it was decisive. Shared custody, fair support, restitution for assets wrongfully withheld. The law corrected itself, not because Grace demanded vengeance, but because she reminded it of its soul. As the gavel fell this time, Grace closed her eyes briefly, whispering a prayer of gratitude. She did not smile until she stepped outside, where sunlight broke through the clouds as if on cue. Life did not become perfect overnight. Grace still worked long hours. She still lived modestly, but she lived with dignity restored. She enrolled in law school the following year, attending classes with students half her age and twice her confidence, and graduating with honors. She dedicated her practice to family law and legal aid, standing beside women who had been told they were nothing, reminding them that they were seen, valued, and protected by both God and the law. Her son grew into a thoughtful young man, proud of his mother, shaped by her quiet strength. He learned that faith was not passive, that humility did not mean silence, and that names mattered not for status, but for the legacy of integrity they represented. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminded you that even when everything is taken from you, your purpose cannot be stolen, please take a moment now to like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories reach others, who may be standing in their own cold November moment. And before this story ends, leave a comment sharing where you found hope in Grace's journey, or simply write the word faith if you believe in God's timing, even when it feels unbearably slow. Grace Whitmore never sought to freeze a courtroom or reclaim a name for applause. She did it because she remembered who she was when everything else was gone. And in doing so, she became living proof that when the world throws you out with nothing, God may be preparing to give you everything that truly matters.